Don't confuse silence with surrender. The deadliest storms make no sound before they strike. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one. No. A lion dressed in lamb's wool, walking through the herd, quiet, calm, gentle-eyed. The others smile, thinking it's just another sheep, easy, harmless. But beneath the soft coat, claws sharpened by pain, teeth carved from experience, eyes that have seen betrayal wear a friendly face. And now, that lion is done pretending. Here's the reality. You've been underestimated. Not because you were weak, but because you played the role so well. They mistook your kindness for naivety, your patience for fear, your quiet for emptiness. But all along, your sweet side wasn't who you are. It was what they needed to see, just long enough for you to study them, learn them, read them like an open book with torn pages. Psychological fact. Studies show that people often mistake agreeable, gentle personalities as low-threat, low-power individuals. It's called benevolent misperception, and it blinds people to the truth standing right in front of them. That truth is you. You didn't wear kindness to please the world. You wore it like armor. It wasn't love, it was leverage. And now the cover is cracking. Thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message forward by simply pressing the like and subscribe button to help spread this message to more souls, because it's the responsibility of all of us to spread the light. You're not just watching this, you're part of a movement, a force, and thank you for being part of it. You were never just another name, you were chosen for a reason. So let's keep going. They thought they knew you. They thought the quiet kid in the room, the one who smiled instead of snapped, forgave instead of fought back, was harmless, that you were all softness and no bite. And maybe for a while, you let them believe it. Not because you were scared, but because you were smarter than the room. See, when you're the chosen one, you don't reveal your hand. You study theirs. You let the snakes show themselves. You let the fools dig their own graves while you stand still and silent. They took your silence as surrender. They didn't realize it was a countdown. Your sweet side? That was the bait. And now the trap is snapping shut. Someone is finally realizing that the version of you they thought they could manipulate doesn't exist anymore, if it ever did. That version was a performance, a necessary illusion, a cover-up so smooth it made them feel safe. But the real you, the one built from scars, forged in isolation, sharpened by betrayal, that version doesn't need permission to rise anymore. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming clear. You're not switching up, you're waking up. The universe gave you the gift of awareness, and with it came one truth. Not everyone deserves access to your softness, because some only show love to get close enough to strike. And when they realize that your sweetness was a shield, not your soul, they panic, they stumble, they slip. Because now they understand. You were never harmless. You were hidden. And the moment they stop seeing you as sweet, they'll finally start seeing the storm you've always been holding back. Chosen one, your silence was never empty. It was loaded, ready, precise. And today, you're done holding back. Let them look shocked. Let them replay every moment they underestimated you. Let them feel the sting of waking up too late to the truth you've always carried quietly. You weren't sweet, you were strategic. And now, someone's finally realizing the truth. So, chosen one, if this message is already lighting a fire in your chest, that's not by accident. It's confirmation. Someone's finally waking up to the truth you've hidden behind that calm smile, and now the whole story's about to unfold. Drop a 777 in the comments if you've ever been underestimated because of your kindness, and if you're ready to turn that silence into strategy, your sweet mask into a memory. And if this message hits home, Bless the mission with a super thanks. Every bit of support fuels the light we're spreading. Whether it's a scent or a storm, your energy is what keeps this truth alive and reaching more awakened souls. And now, let's dive into it step by step. Trust me, if you're truly one of the chosen, you won't be able to pull away. You'll feel the pull to stay, to listen, to awaken deeper, because this isn't just a message, it's a mirror. Let's get into it. Number 1. They took your smile for stupidity. Now watch them choke on their own misjudgment. They saw sugar. You were salt in disguise. Now their wounds are starting to sting. Chosen one. They thought they had you figured out. Thought your calm meant you were clueless, that your softness made you safe. That smile you wore, they mistook it for surrender, not realizing it was a smokescreen. But let's be clear, you didn't play nice because you were scared. You played nice because you were smart, strategic, surgical. You kept your blade hidden behind your grin, and they walked right into it. Now imagine this. A surgeon doesn't scream during surgery. A sniper doesn't shout before taking the shot. And neither did you. You walked among them quietly, kindly, while keeping mental receipts on every insult, every manipulation, every backhanded joke they thought you'd never catch. You let them show their true selves while you handed them the illusion of safety. What a masterpiece of misdirection. And here's what's brutal. They really thought they had control over you, that you were just this soft, malleable soul who'd always turn the other cheek. But the universe doesn't hand sharp minds to the naive. It hands them to the patient. And you've been patient long enough. Let's address what's echoing in your mind right now. Was I too nice? Did I let them get away with too much? No, chosen one. You weren't being weak. You were gathering evidence. You gave them rope, not out of mercy, but so they could build their own noose. And now they're starting to feel the choke, that sweetness they used to mock. It was the silence before the thunder. It was the peace before the storm. You didn't expose them, they exposed themselves. You just let the timeline do the talking. Psychologists call this the halo effect. When someone appears kind and gentle, people automatically assume they're harmless, or worse, gullible. You were neither. You were a chess player pretending to play checkers. And while they were jumping squares, you were lining up the checkmate. Let's go deeper. That version of you, the one who answered texts quickly, forgave too fast, stayed long after the respect was gone, that version was a decoy. A carefully crafted mirage. You weren't there to connect, you were there to confirm, to study, to let the enemy build confidence so that their eventual fall would be from their own height, not your push. You see, the dangerous thing about silent strength is that it makes fools comfortable, and comfortable people get sloppy. They talk too much, they show too much. They forget that some of the deadliest creatures in nature are quiet, camouflaged, waiting, just like you were. Your kindness wasn't a character flaw, it was a cloak. And now that you've dropped it, the panic in their eyes is louder than any apology. They're scrambling, gaslighting, rewriting history, but it's too late. You already took the mask off, and what they're really afraid of now is your memory, your silence, your distance, because they know once someone like you goes quiet, the story's over. This is where it hits hard. You were never obligated to play soft just to make others feel strong. You were never born to dim your light so their shadows could feel less exposed. You gave them more grace than they deserved, more time than they earned. And when you finally pulled back, they felt it like a blackout, because you weren't just a kind person. You were their supply of energy, validation, and control. And now that it's gone, they're starving. This isn't a villain arc. this is your origin story. The sweet version of you was a strategic illusion. Now you're stepping into the version that's built from truth, forged in fire and cleansed in silence. You were never the nice one. You were the necessary one, the calm before collapse. And now that your kindness is no longer available, they're watching their comfort crumble. Let them remember how safe they felt when you were pretending. Let them replay the times they thought they had you under control. Because this next version of you, it's not here to negotiate. It's here to restore balance. Let them say you changed. Let them say you switched up, because they'll never admit what really happened, that you outgrew the role they forced you to play, that you realized your peace was never theirs to toy with, that you decided to choose yourself over their chaos. You were never soft. You were sealed. So now, when they look at you and see the steel behind the silence, the cold behind the calm, they'll remember every chance you gave them and every one they wasted. You didn't lose control. You reclaimed your power, quietly, brutally, precisely. And here's the twist that stings the most for them. You were always this powerful. You just didn't show it because you didn't need to. You thought they could handle the sweet version. But since they couldn't respect that, they'll now learn to respect the storm. Chosen one, don't you dare feel guilty for evolving. Don't second-guess the silence you've chosen. It's not coldness, it's clarity. You're no longer trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You're no longer feeding energy to people who mistook your kindness for currency. You were the blessing they prayed for, but they treated you like background noise. Now the silence is deafening, and all that's left is the echo of what they thought was forever. So don't look back, don't soften up, don't return to sweetness just to keep the peace. You gave that version. You buried that version. Now walk in the power of who you truly are. You're not the sweet one. You're the storm they laughed at until it hit. Number 2, they thought you were soft, but you were just camouflaged in kindness. They thought you were protecting them from your weakness. You were really protecting yourself from their intentions. Chosen one. Let's make something crystal clear. You didn't wear that kindness because the world treated you gently. You wore it because the world gave you no choice. Life didn't hand you peace. It handed you pressure, pain, patterns you had to decode just to survive. You didn't choose to be sweet. You adapted to stay safe. Your kindness wasn't a reflection of your innocence. It was armor. Polished, pretty, and perfectly designed to keep you breathing while the world tried to suffocate your truth. Imagine this for a moment. You're a lion in a room full of wolves, but instead of roaring, you purr. Not because you can't roar, but because you know wolves panic when they hear power. You learned early that people fear what they can't control, and you, chosen one, are uncontrollable. So you played the part. You lowered your energy, made your light softer, dulled your edge, not because you lacked fire, but because fire terrifies those who live in the dark. You didn't hide because you were weak. You hid because you were wise. Let's answer the question burning in your mind right now. Was I faking it all along? Number 1, you weren't faking. You were surviving. You were navigating environments that couldn't handle your full volume, that couldn't process your unfiltered truth without turning it into a weapon against you. You adjusted, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. That's not being fake. That's being strategic. You mastered emotional camouflage like a soldier learns to read a battlefield. Every smile was calculated. Every soft reply was loaded with observation. You didn't engage to connect. You engaged to collect. You studied their tone, their timing, the way they blinked when they lied, the way they deflected when confronted. You were never passive, you were processing, and they mistook your silence for submission. You weren't sweet, you were silent, and silenced is where warriors sharpen their blades. Now imagine this. You're in a room where every eye is watching, every word is a trap, and every hand is hiding a knife. What do? You smile, you disarm, you lower your voice and raise your awareness. You play the game, not to win friends, but to expose enemies. That's what you've done your entire life, chosen one. Your emotional camouflage wasn't cowardice, it was precision warfare. It kept you breathing when others wanted to bury you. They thought you were soft because you didn't explode, but you knew if you ever did, nothing would be left standing. They thought you were fragile because you bent, but you bent like bamboo, flexible, unbreakable, and always rising back taller after the storm. What they called weakness was really restraint. And now that you've dropped the mask, they're starting to understand they were never dealing with a doormat. They were dancing on a minefield. People mistook your calm for peace, but peace was just your cover while you mapped the chaos. You weren't trying to fit in, you were trying not to be targeted. There's a difference. You weren't molding yourself to be liked. You were reading the room, calculating who was a threat, who was pretending, who would fold if pressure ever knocked on their door. You knew they couldn't handle your truth, so you gave them a version of you they could digest. Sweet, quiet, agreeable. But behind those calm eyes was a soul in full alert, logging every move, archiving every betrayal, waiting for the moment the curtain would fall. And now that it has, now they're nervous. Because the person they thought they could manipulate, control, guilt, or gaslight has vanished. And what's left is the original, the unfiltered, uncamouflaged force they never had the guts to face. You've outgrown the act, outgrown the need to shrink for their comfort. You don't need the mask anymore because you've learned how to breathe without it. They're scrambling now, trying to figure out when the shift happened. But the truth is, it didn't happen overnight. You were always this strong. You just kept it under wraps, like a blade hidden in plain sight. Now that it's out, they're not looking at the same person. They're looking at the truth they never wanted to see, and it terrifies them. You used to fake softness to survive. Now your silence speaks louder than their screams. This moment, this unveiling, is not your villain arc. It's your liberation. You're not turning dark, you're shedding the disguise. You're not getting mean, you're reclaiming your space. And the energy they're feeling now, that discomfort, that's the absence of the person who kept them emotionally fed while starving themselves. So don't question it, don't regret it. That emotional camouflage saved your life more times than anyone will ever know. But you don't live in survival mode anymore. You've earned the right to be raw, real, unapologetic. You've earned the right to show up without a filter, without shrinking, without dimming just to make others feel tall. You never played sweet because you were simple. You played sweet because you were scanning. And now that the scan is complete and the act is dropped, the battlefield is cleared. And what's left? A version of you that can't be manipulated, played, or misunderstood. A version of you that doesn't need approval, doesn't chase clarity, and doesn't second-guess their intuition. This is who you were always meant to be. Let them sit with it. Let them spiral. Let them replay every conversation, wondering when the shift started, because they'll never find a moment. You didn't change. You revealed. And now that you're finally walking without the weight of pretending, the world is about to see what a real chosen one looks like in full power. And it's not sweet. It's silent. It's sharp. It's unstoppable. Number 3, they mistook your silence for safety. Now they're about to learn what it was, hiding. The loudest ones seek to prove their power. The most dangerous ones never need to. Chosen one, they thought your silence meant surrender. They thought because you didn't lash out, you couldn't. Because you didn't expose them, you wouldn't. What they never realized is this: you weren't biting your tongue out of fear. You were holding back the fire out of mercy. You weren't scared of the war. You were calculating the cost. And the only reason they got away with what they did was because you let them. Now imagine this. A volcano doesn't erupt every time it shakes. It builds, it simmers. And while everyone on the surface lives like they're safe, those who understand what's underneath know. One crack, one shift, and everything changes. That's what you are. That's what they underestimated. You weren't dormant. You were contained by choice. You didn't hold back because you couldn't burn them down. You held back because you didn't want to live among ashes. Let's answer what might be lingering in your mind. Was I too quiet? Did I let them walk too far? No, chosen one. You weren't quiet. You were composed. You were watching how far they'd go when they thought there were no consequences. And they failed that test spectacularly. They thought they could keep pushing, that their games would go unnoticed. But your silence wasn't ignorance, it was observation. You were logging every move, storing receipts, preparing for the moment when silence would no longer be mercy, but a loaded trigger. They never noticed the difference between someone who can't speak and someone who chooses not to. Now the air is shifting, and they feel it. The way you've gone quiet, it's not the same as before. This isn't the silence of suppression. It's the silence of separation, detachment, exit. You weren't quiet to keep the peace. You were quiet to give them one last chance. But they didn't take it. They kept testing your restraint like it was weakness, like you were harmless. And now they're beginning to understand. You were the calm before the collapse. You never lacked power. You just didn't see the point in wasting it on people too small to understand its weight. And now the mask is off, and the silence has ended. Number 4. They took your sweetness for safety, not knowing it was just a countdown in disguise. They thought the smile meant surrender, not knowing it was just a timer set to explode once the truth revealed itself. Chosen one, you were never trying to be liked. That version of you, the one that laughed gently, spoke softly, held back while chaos circled, wasn't who you were. It was who they could handle. That wasn't your truth. That was your tactic. You weren't offering peace. You were offering a pause, a moment, a delay, because you already knew what you were capable of, and they weren't ready for it. Imagine this: a tornado doesn't touch down immediately. It twists quietly in the sky, watching the ground below, measuring its impact before making contact. That's exactly what you did. You danced in disguise while they mistook grace for gullibility. Every sweet gesture, every calm retreat was just you giving them space to show who they really were. And oh, they showed it loudly. The version of you they loved was the version you allowed, not the one you were hiding. Let's address the question rising in your spirit. Was I being fake? Was I wrong for holding back? No, chosen one. That wasn't fakeness. That was discipline. You weren't concealing your power. You were choosing not to waste it. Not everyone deserves to see the storm. Some only get the sunshine because that's all they could ever survive. And you gave them warmth, not out of weakness, but because you were waiting, watching, calculating. They thought your kindness was permanent. They believed the gentle version of you was the full version. But that was their mistake, assuming the stall was the story, not realizing it was just the setup. Because now, the delay is over. You've lifted the mask, and the person standing in front of them is the one they were never ready to meet. Not because you changed, but because you finally decided they weren't worth the lie anymore. They weren't afraid of the real you. They were afraid of losing the version they could manipulate. Your sweetness was never your default. It was your decision, a temporary cloak wrapped over an inferno they never saw coming. And now that the cloak is off, they're watching everything they took for granted vanish. You didn't evolve into dangerous, you just stopped stalling. Number 5, you used grace like a loaded weapon, silent, precise, and deadly. They thought you were letting it slide. You were letting it stack. Chosen one, they misunderstood your silence. They thought you were letting things go because you were afraid to clap back. They mistook your calm for surrender, not knowing that every quiet moment was you loading the chamber. You didn't choose grace because you were powerless. You chose it because it gave you control. Grace was never about being soft. It was about staying in command while they danced on their own landmine. Imagine this: a skilled sniper doesn't shoot at the first movement. They breathe, they study, they wait for the perfect moment where every angle aligns and one shot changes everything. That's how you moved. You weren't ignoring the disrespect. You were tracking it, counting it, letting them feel safe, while knowing full well what you were about to take from them when the time came. You didn't choose grace because they were worthy of it. You chose grace because silence is the sharpest sound when everything else breaks. Let's confront what you might be thinking. Did I stay too calm? Did I wait too long to respond? No, you stayed exactly long enough. You didn't hold back because you were unsure. You held back because you were setting the board. You were making sure every piece fell into place before you made your move. They thought your silence was clearance. It was actually closure in progress. While they were busy testing limits, you were mapping routes, studying faces, reading their tone like a manual. Every fake laugh, every passive jab, every manipulative stunt, you let it slide, but not because you missed it. You chose not to react. That's the power they'll never understand. You weren't out of options. You were surrounded by them. They thought your grace was submission. It was surveillance. You let them build their false confidence because you knew their collapse would be louder when they realized they did it to themselves. And now, when things begin to unravel, when they can't pinpoint the exact moment it all started slipping, that's the beauty of grace. It doesn't announce judgment. It just lets it happen. Grace doesn't yell, it watches, and then it wins without ever lifting its voice. You still haven't raised your voice. You didn't have to, because your grace was never weakness. It was the most dangerous kind of warning, quiet, measured, and final. Number 6. You let them write the wrong story so you could rip up the ending. They mistook your silence for simplicity, but you were never the character. They were just extras in your script. Chosen one, you saw the setup from day one, the way they looked at you like you were easy to handle, like you were some soft soul, naive and harmless, ready to be molded into their emotional doormat. They measured you with lazy assumptions and convinced themselves they had you figured out. And you let them. Not because you didn't know who you were, but because you knew exactly who they were. You didn't waste your breath correcting their fantasy. You didn't argue with the lie they built about you. Why would you? The bigger the illusion they built, the more blind they became to the storm quietly forming behind your eyes. You didn't shrink to please them. You shrank to study them. When people assume they've got you small, they forget to guard what matters. That's when you strike, not with rage, but with revelation. Imagine this. You're sitting at a poker table with your entire hand laid out in your mind, but your face gives away nothing. The others at the table think you're bluffing. They laugh, talk over you, throw shade disguised as charm. They're so convinced of their position that they can't see they're being led straight into their own checkmate. That's what you did. They were bluffing arrogance. You were holding strategy. They thought they were running the show, believed their little digs went unnoticed. They thought your sweet nods, your polite smiles meant you agreed. What they didn't see was the mental blueprint you were building behind every glance. You were reading every motive, decoding every projection, dissecting every move like a scientist studying a specimen. The more they assumed they were in control, the more power you gained, silently, efficiently, perfectly timed. You let them believe the lie so deeply they couldn't recognize the truth, even when it stood right in front of them. And now, the illusion's shattered. The version of you they built in their head is gone. And the real you? It's not soft. It's not simple. It's strategic. And now they're spinning, panicking, trying to figure out how the harmless one suddenly became the one holding all the cards. They never saw it coming because they never thought they had to. But this was never their story. It was yours all along, and you just flipped the final page. Checkmate. Number 7. You used softness like a spotlight. Now their darkness has nowhere to hide. You weren't trying to prove you were good. You were giving them the chance to prove they weren't. Chosen one. Your kindness was never an invitation. It was a test. A trap with velvet lining. You didn't show up with an open heart because you were desperate for connection. You showed up that way to see who would handle your purity with respect and who would poison it with manipulation. You didn't just bring softness into the room. You brought strategy cloaked in sincerity, and they fell for it, hard. Imagine this. A scientist releases a clear substance into murky water, not to clean it, but to see what rises to the surface. That's what your energy did. It brought clarity, not by force, but by contrast. You let them reveal themselves. All you had to do was stay consistent in your light, and the ones operating in shadow exposed their own nature, word by word, action by action. They thought your gentleness meant you were harmless, but you weren't gentle to comfort them. You were gentle to confront them without saying a word. Let's clear up any doubt that might be crossing your mind. Was I too nice? Did I allow too much? No, you allowed enough. Enough rope for them to show their character. Enough silence for them to fill with their real intentions. You weren't blind. You were building a case. And now that case is closed. They thought they were smarter, thought they were playing you while smiling to your face. But the truth is, you let them play their part so well, they didn't notice you wrote the script. You weren't responding to what they said. You were studying what they hid. Your kindness wasn't weakness, it was bait, and they swallowed it whole, never realizing it was laced with accountability. You didn't wear sweetness to hide your fire. You wore it to expose theirs. And now, the stage lights are on, and they're the ones squirming, because it's not just that you see through them, it's that they know you've always seen through them. They can't lie to you anymore. They can't gaslight or twist the narrative. You never reacted, but you always recorded. Now the masks are off. You're done pretending to be sweet. They're done pretending to be good. And what's left is something most can't survive. Truth with no disguise. Number 8. They thought you were the lamb. Now they're learning you were the one holding the blade the whole time. You weren't the prey. You were the quiet power guarding the path, with a blade behind your back and silence in your steps. Chosen one. They saw your gentleness and assumed it meant you could be stepped on. They saw your calm, your mercy, your ability to let things go, and they thought that made you weak, easy, containable. They mistook your peaceful energy for submission, thought your grace was a cage. But they had no idea that behind that lamb's presence stood a strategist, a protector, a silent warrior. You weren't just walking in peace, you were guarding it. And that's what they never understood. You didn't avoid the fight because you were afraid. You avoided it because you knew once you stepped into that mode, there would be no undoing it. Imagine this. A shepherd standing quietly on the edge of a cliff, watching the wind shift. The sheep think he's just standing there, but he's already counted the storm clouds, noted the predators, and chosen where to draw the line. He doesn't swing wildly, he waits, watches, then strikes with one clean, final blow. That was you all along. You weren't calm because you couldn't rage. You were calm because you knew the exact cost of unleashing what's buried inside you. Let's speak to the doubt some of you may be feeling. Was I wrong for being patient? Did I wait too long to respond? No, you were right. You weren't frozen. You were focused. Giving space wasn't weakness. It was an opportunity for them to rethink, to retreat, and they didn't take it. They kept pushing, smirking, taking your kindness for a cage they could rattle without consequence. But what they never saw coming was this version of you, the one that draws the line, not just with words, but with finality. Not the lamb, not the forgiver, but the protector, the one who doesn't tolerate disrespect in the name of keeping the peace. Because real peace doesn't survive without boundaries. And now they've crossed one. They expected forgiveness on repeat, but what they got was a reckoning dressed in robes. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought you were soft because you spoke gently, thought you wouldn't push back because you stood in peace. But now they're realizing you never were the lamb. You were the hand behind the lamb. The one carrying the sword, the one who remembers everything they thought would fade. And now, they're face to face with the consequences they never believed would come. The peace was real, but so was the sword. You didn't change. You just decided it was time to draw it. Now they know. Number 9. They thought your kindness was the limit. Now they're watching you cross the line with no intention of turning back. Your smile wasn't safety. It was the final warning before the storm. Chosen one. They never understood what they were really looking at. That sweet side, that calm tone, that patient energy. It wasn't your core. It was your cover. A final line of defense before something much more dangerous stepped forward. You weren't smiling because you were soft. You were smiling because you were giving them one last chance to make it right before everything changed. They mistook your kindness for your ceiling, believing you'd always stay small, stay nice, stay forgiving. But what they thought was your final form was just your restraint, beautifully disguised. What they couldn't comprehend was that your sweetness was never meant to last. It was a waiting room, not a forever home. Imagine this. A dam doesn't break without pressure. It holds back thousands of tons of force, not because it's weak, but because it's designed to give people a chance to fix the leaks before the flood comes. That's what you were. Grace under pressure. Holding back the tidal wave, hoping they'd take the hint. But they didn't. They kept pressing, poking, disrespecting, thinking your silence meant surrender. You didn't stop being sweet. You outgrew the need to waste sweetness on people who mistook it for submission. Now, something has shifted, and they feel it. That smile doesn't warm the room anymore. It chills it. Because it no longer carries grace, it carries clarity. You've stopped hoping they'll change. You've stopped inviting peace to people who come to devour it, and they can sense it in your presence, even if you've said nothing, especially because you've said nothing. Let's kill the illusion. Did you flip too fast? Should you have warned them? No, chosen one. The warning was every kind thing you did, every boundary you allowed them to cross without consequence, every chance you gave, and now that time is over. They don't fear your anger. That's easy to fight. They fear your detachment, your calm, the way you pull back all your energy without yelling, without cursing, without announcing it, just gone, silent, done. They can't control what they can't guilt, and you've become untouchable to all their old tricks. Now they're facing someone who sees through the performance and refuses to applaud it. Someone who isn't here to fix what they keep breaking. The switch has flipped. The sweetness is gone. And what stands in its place is something they're completely unprepared for. The real you, unfiltered, unbothered, unreachable. And that silence, that's not peace. That's the end. Number 10. They forgot angels don't just sing, they strike. They saw your halo and assumed it was just for light, not knowing it was also a target tracker. Chosen one, they confused your peace with passivity. They saw your empathy and assumed it meant you wouldn't push back. They watched how you forgave, how you gave second chances, and decided you must be weak, soft, breakable. But that was their greatest mistake. They never stopped to consider that your light came from surviving darkness, and that you didn't walk out of the fire empty-handed. You weren't built to be agreeable. You were built to be accurate. They expected a pushover in soft clothing. What they got was a storm cloaked in serenity. You didn't show up to soothe egos. You showed up to expose everything that hides behind charm, title, or manipulation. You were never just light. You were heat. And now that you've stopped dimming it, the whole room is burning. They thought you were here to make peace. You were sent to make it impossible for lies to stay comfortable. Imagine this. A quiet figure steps into the room, calm, centered, still. No threats, no noise, just presence. Everyone relaxes until the light starts revealing things they were hoping to keep hidden. Shadows shift, masks slip, and the people who once smiled in your face start trembling. Not because you changed, but because you turned up the volume on your truth. That's exactly what you've done. They didn't understand that love without power is incomplete, that grace without boundaries is just self-destruction in disguise. You carried grace, yes, but you also carried fire. You gave people time to correct themselves, to take accountability. But now, that time has run out. And the same light they used to admire now feels like judgment walking in human form. Let's be clear, you were never meant to keep everyone comfortable. You were meant to make liars twitch, to make abusers sweat, to make manipulators feel the pressure of being fully seen. You weren't here to serve their comfort. You were here to serve the mission. You don't carry feathers, you carry flame, and they're finally starting to feel the burn. What they're facing now isn't rage, it's justice, it's alignment. You were silent, patient, forgiving, until the switch flipped. Now the warrior has awakened, and it doesn't whisper, it roars, not in chaos, but in clarity. Not to destroy blindly, but to strike precisely. You didn't come to play nice. You came to reset the room, and you don't ask permission to do it. Number 11. They clung to your kindness, like a mask. Now they're choking on the truth it used to hide. They didn't crave your love. They craved your ability to make them feel like they weren't the villain. Chosen one, they weren't addicted to your presence. They were addicted to your protection. Not the kind that shields people from harm, but the kind that shields them from their own reflection. Your kindness gave them cover. Your patience gave them an illusion. As long as you didn't call them out, they could pretend they were still good, still decent, still innocent. But now that you've stepped back, they're facing the one thing they never prepared for, themselves. They used your sweetness like a fog. As long as you were soft, they never had to face the sharp edges of their actions. You absorbed their outbursts, their lies, their emotional laziness without retaliation, and that made them bold, comfortable, arrogant. They mistook your grace for proof that they weren't doing anything wrong, because you weren't screaming, because you weren't punishing. But here's the truth. You were never silent because they were right. You were silent because you were tired. You didn't let things slide because you couldn't confront. You did it because they weren't ready for the weight of the mirror you carried. Imagine this, someone standing in front of a cracked mirror, smiling, pretending the fractures aren't real, until you step away and the whole reflection collapses. That's what your exit did. Not with rage, not with revenge, just absence. And in that silence, everything they hid from came flooding back. Not because you cursed them, but because you stopped covering for them. They're suffocating now, but not from your wrath, from your withdrawal, from the loss of the one person who never needed to shame them, yet whose presence alone made them question everything. Your light didn't just illuminate the room, it protected them from their own shadow. Now the protection is gone. They called you peaceful, but it was your self-control they leaned on, and now that it's gone, they're left drowning in the noise of their own lies. You didn't destroy them, you didn't expose them, you simply stopped enabling them, and that's what's unraveling them now. Not what you did, but what you're no longer doing. You're no longer holding the line, no longer softening the blow, no longer giving them space to feel like decent people while treating you indecently. Your kindness was never a weakness, it was a shield. Now the shield is gone, and all they have left is the mess they made. Number 10. You didn't just change, you returned to power the world was never meant to handle. They thought the sweet version was your truth, but sweetness was just the camouflage of a warrior waiting for divine clearance. Chosen one, they didn't witness your transformation, they're watching your return. That sweet, calm, conflict-avoiding version of you wasn't a lie. It was a layer, a protective skin you wore to survive environments not built to hold your magnitude. You weren't fake. You were strategic. That version of you took hits, swallowed chaos, smiled when it hurt, and stayed silent when truth would have shattered everything. You wore softness like a cloak, not because you were scared of the fire, but because you were the fire and the world wasn't ready to burn yet. Now, that version is gone, not dead, retired. You've outgrown the need to shrink for approval, to delay truth for peace, or to sacrifice your voice for someone else's comfort. The real you has resurrected. And what's rising doesn't come with apologies, doesn't flinch at confrontation, and doesn't negotiate with dysfunction. They don't miss your kindness, they miss the control it gave them. Let's speak to the part of you that wonders, was I too soft for too long? No. That softness was sacred, but now it's been replaced with clarity. And clarity is cold when you've been warmed by illusion for too long. They're not scared because you've become cruel. They're scared because the buttons don't work anymore. You've pulled the plug on guilt, pity, manipulation, and emotional shortcuts. The same smile that once gave them comfort now signals distance and power. Imagine this, a soldier who's removed the camouflage, still silent, still, but now fully visible. There's no fear, because fear was never the reason you stayed hidden. The real you wasn't lost. It was just waiting for alignment, waiting for the permission that didn't come from people, but from the assignment. You didn't get distant, you got divine. You're not proving anything anymore. You're not trying to be understood. You're not giving free passes to people who've spent their time proving they don't deserve them. The doors you used to leave cracked open are now shut, sealed, and guarded. Not out of bitterness, but evolution. That former version of you held space for everyone's process, even if it cost your peace. The one that's here now, it costs nothing and demands everything. This is reckoning energy. This is original blueprint energy. The soft-spoken version gave them comfort. This version gives them consequences. You don't hand out grace where there's no growth. You don't stay small so others don't feel convicted. And you damn sure don't bow to be accepted by people who never knew what they were standing in the presence of. They thought your sweetness was safety. It was actually strategy. They thought you were agreeable. You were actually watching. They thought they had access. They were just being observed. Now the mask is off. The role is over. The resurrected you doesn't chase love, doesn't defend truth, and doesn't fear solitude. That version doesn't whisper warnings. It walks away, silent, focused, final. Let them say you changed, because you did. You ascended. And sacred doesn't explain itself. It just rises. And so we arrive, chosen one. The sweet facade has fallen. The sword sings in open air, and every room you enter now recalibrates around your truth. You no longer bend, negotiate, or delay. Your clarity has become its own weather system, shifting everything that can't withstand the pressure. Remember, the version rising today is the one the universe always intended. Untouchable, unmanageable, absolutely final. Keep this fire alive. Smash like, pound subscribe, drop 777 in the comments to mark your awakening, and share this message so every hidden warrior finds it. Together, we rewrite the battlefield with our unstoppable collective surge.